Alright guys, well today we're going to make some neon dice with my new eye candy pigments. So I'm going to be doing a dirty pour. As you can see, I got my dirty pour cup that's ironically kind of dirty. Got my measuring cups, stir sticks, pipettes. Very important for getting out air bubbles and doing fine work. Of course, safety first. Nitrile gloves. There's a better view of my dirty pour cup. It's clean, but like I said, a little bit dirty. And then, of course, I got my resin pigment scooper. Yep, gotta make sure to clean them off. I got my new, like I said, eye candy there. Very bright. Of course, got my dice molds. That's very important to have. Gotta make dice. Gotta have dice molds. And rubber bands. And some parchment paper, of course. Gotta have that to keep the mess cleaned up. First thing I'm gonna do is get my cups ready, and then I'm using my Envirotex light resin. I'm gonna pour just about 4.5 ounces of resin and hardener. Sorry. I'll put a link to this down in my bio. And I'm going to make sure I get it topped off right to where it needs to be. Oop, a little bit too much. I think I decided to go on a full 5. And then right about here, I realized I might not have enough room to somewhat cleanly mix these. I want to give it a shot anyway. And nope, not going to work out. So now anything bigger that's disposable, I got one of the old cups out of the kitchen and started dumping my mixture in there and started stirring it for the recommended time. That was fun, especially trying to reach down to the cup. You got to make sure that you scrape the sides, the bottom of your cup every once in a while. Scrape your stir stick off, check to make sure everything's mixed up. And then once it's all mixed up, I'm going to go ahead and pour it back into my cups. I'm using 2 colors, so I need 2 different clean cups to do this in. And then I'm going to scrape the rest of this out, but I'll skip that boring part here. I'm going to open up the pigment powder. This is the nice neon yellow here. And it's got a safety seal on it. So as I use my knife, and as with most packaging, had a hard time and kind of got it everywhere. My gloves, my work surface. The orange powder didn't go too much better for me. As you can see, this stuff gets everywhere. So I'm going to start mixing stuff up. Give it a couple taps here, a couple spoonfuls. Start trying to mix it. This is when I noticed that it was really kind of see-through, more than I expected compared to the other pigments I've worked with. I've never worked with the neon pigments or eye candy. It was kind of more translucent, like I said, than I wanted. So I busted out some more. Why not? Big old jar, so. And I'm hoping that does it. Stir that back up. This stuff likes to stick to the walls, so you gotta get going pretty good there. And here I am just loading up the resin cup with the yellow pigment, which definitely went everywhere. This actually kind of reminded me more or less of some of the bright yellow fishing lures you can find in the bait section of like your whatever store, your sports store, supermarket, wherever they sell artificial baits at. So I'm going to load up my dirty pour cup. I got a 3-slot resin cup, but I'm just going to use 2. So I'm going to pour on the outside. They tend to go into the middle anyway when it kind of spills back into itself. And here in a second we'll get to the pouring part. Always try to get everything ready, get my lid put aside. Now, one thing that is important when you're pouring your resin, if you're using multiple molds, that you make sure that the correct mold goes with the correct lid. That's why you'll notice that a lot of my molds have different layouts. That way I can compare the lids if I ever get them mixed up. And now I'm just really trying to separate them by color. So we'll see how that goes. And you just got to fill each one up, top them off a little bit overflowing there. It's a good measure to take because when you put them in the pressure pot, it will force air bubbles out, which will force more resin in. And if you don't have enough resin, you're going to come up with some air pocketed dice or some pulled faces, maybe if you don't have your lid secured tight enough. You can see back there that I was just going ahead and I was dumping. Oh, here we go again. Excess resin. I ended up with a lot of extra flash on this, but I'd rather have extra flash after using this much resin instead of you can actually see right here that some of the yellow pigment never mixed in. I mixed it for a while too, but I'd rather have too much flash and waste a little bit of resin than to waste the time and have a bunch of dice turn out that's not usable. Here I'm just squishing the cap back on, not super tough, or sorry, it's not super strongly, or forcing it on there, just kind of making sure it's seated all the way. I do wrap these in parchment paper, a little trick I learned off of some videos on YouTube, and wrap them with a loose rubber band, and just to make sure the tops don't pop off. If you're able to maybe get a piece of acrylic or something else over this, secure that with a rubber band. That's definitely going to keep you from having faces that are pulled off. Anyway, I did that for all the dice molds, and now I'm just going to go ahead and pour this dice box with the same mixture. I don't know if you guys ever had those astronaut popsicles or the cherry pineapple flavored popsicles. Those are some of my, actually it probably is my favorite popsicle, but this is what it reminded me of. And of course this is a 3-ounce mold between the lid and the base, so I had to refill. Luckily I had just enough resin left and had a little bit left over, so I was able to fill it up and keep on keeping on. And then we'll squeeze the last little bits out here. Make sure we got plenty of resin. And I always forget to do this, but when I use these molds that are a little flimsy, I find it best to pour your resin into the molds while they're already on whatever platform you're going to use in your pressure pot. And here I'm just taking a pipette. These lids on these molds tend to get air pockets right in the corners, like you kind of see. What I do is I get a little bit of resin from the actual lid itself into the pipette, and you can actually see where I force one of the air bubbles out there, and I use it to force the air bubbles out. Now these are very important to keep level. Most things should be level, but like the dice molds, they don't have to be level. So I get my smaller pressure pot out here, tighten the lid down, opposite sides of course like we're used to, get as tight as I can, and keep on going. There we go, should be ready. And I just kind of put these in, make sure they're upright, but as far as dice go, since they're overfilled anyways and there's a surface on top, I find you don't have to keep it super level. So, and just like with the other pressure pot, and tighten it down here, and it's time to put the air in. So I connect the air hose for my noisy air compressor, and here's a time lapse of it getting up to 40 psi, which is what most people tend to use for all that kind of fun stuff. And we're just going to go right on into it with the next one. And this is another time lapse up to 40 psi. Good recommended working pressure again. And there we go. Now we're going to wait for the next day. While we're waiting though, don't forget to subscribe by clicking the button down below or wherever it's at on your screen. Yeah, let's go ahead and release the pressure. It's 24 hours or so later, and I'll let you listen to that real quick right here. Isn't that satisfying? Oh, look at this. Came out quite nice actually. Had a little bit of overflow, but it wasn't too bad. That can all be trimmed off later. A little bit of air pockets that's still stuck up there, but I was probably keeping my working time too low. Kind of got stuck under that, and let's see. To the rescue. Very carefully if you're going to do this. Don't try this if you're a child or don't have strong motor skills. Very carefully you can remove those. And now let's go ahead and demold the cut part of the base. Careful, you can tear these silicone molds pretty easily. And I don't want to squish the resin because while it's hardened and you can demold it, it's still flexible. I don't want to bend this out of shape, but I gotta say these came out looking quite nice, and I'm pretty excited to see what the dice look like. Just like the popsicle. Lid goes on good. There's a little air pocket in there. Right there, you can see it over by my right finger for a second, but nothing too horrible. Now let's get these dice going. All 5 sets. So we go through, pop those rubber bands off. You can see all the flashing just kind of leaked out of even the parchment paper. It's kind of like Christmas unwrapping presents, and that is a lot of flashing. But you know what's fun? Pulling all that flashing off. At least when it's the thicker flashing. The other stuff's kind of hard to get out sometimes. Yeah, it's kind of like packaging. I struggled with it. And it kind of looks gross here, but wait till the end. Sometimes I have a competition with myself to see how many of these dice I can get out without tearing the flashing off. If I have a thick flashing like that. Cannot speak today. Whoop, okay, we'll get it later. Yeah. So, now it's time to just take a look. You can see the specs actually came out looking pretty cool. Probably ink these in black when I get around to it. But I got 5 sets of usable dice out of here. And now it's time to just rip the flashing off. And this is kind of what they look like right now. Voila! Big old pile of flashing in the background, but I think they turned out real nice. Beautiful, I think, for my first neon foray. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. It's always a fun time to make videos for everybody. Later.